that these may become a problem. Let's bring in MSNBC contributor Adrienne Elrod, former senior advisor to the Hillary Clinton campaign, Danielle Moodie-Mills, host of the Woke AF podcast on SiriusXM, and Republican strategist Lauren Zelt, senior vice president of FP1 Strategies. Ladies, good to see all three of you. Adrienne, are you concerned that Biden keeps having these incidents? Do you think it could affect his standings if they keep happening?
You know, I'm not really concerned, Alex, because so far, to the point that you just made, we're not really seeing these gaffes reflect poorly for Joe Biden in the polls. I mean, he's still riding on top. He's still -- 1 in all of the polls. He's growing his base, especially in the key constituencies like the African-American community and older white voters who tend to be the most reliable voting bloc in the Democratic Party. But at the same time, they're also not ideal, because I think what it does is remind people of his age and remind people, that there is a younger generation of candidates who are running in this primary. But so far, we are not seeing this reflect on him, and I think that people are so worried about beating Trump. Democratic primary voters believe that Joe Biden at this point is still the most electable candidate. They're so worried about beating Trump, and so that's taking the precedent over any sort of, damage that a gaffe could have on his poll standings.
Well, this wasn't an isolated incident, certainly, because Biden also raised some eyebrows this week after saying this to voters. Let's take a listen to that.
I graduated in 1968. My two political heroes were Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy. My senior semester, they were both shot and killed. Imagine what would have happened if, God forbid, Barack Obama had been assassinated after becoming the de facto nominee. What would have happened in America?
Look, Danielle, there are those that interpret this as somewhat questionable judgment by painting this picture in the first place. What's your reaction?
I didn't understand why Joe Biden felt the need to conjure up that memory, especially as we have right now white nationalists and white supremacy on the rise, and there have been a number of people that have been arrested because they were attempting mass shootings. So I don't think that it's the right imagery. I also think that he forgets that the people that he's talking to, many young people, were, they have grown up in 9/11, were born after 9/11 and have lived with kind of the residuals of that horrific tragedy. They've lived through the Great Recession. So there are horrific things that have actually happened, and school shootings that young people, millennials, Gen X, folks have lived through. And so I'm not really sure what he wanted to do there, like what the correlation was and that imagery was. But I think, to the point, these gaffes are problematic, but they're not a symptom to me of Joe Biden's age. He's been doing this his entire career. This is why he tends to kind of putter out, and he's run for president 3 times. The polls are on his side now, but I think that his folks should be worried, because it doesn't feel like he is strong right now and has the stamina and the energy and the heart that he once had in this race.
I'm curious with regard to the president, because he certainly has started going after Biden's gaffe, saying things like he's not playing with a full deck. So, Lauren, if this ends up being the presidential matchup in November, how far does that argument take Trump, especially as his own words and actions are constantly under scrutiny?
I think to answer that question, you need to look back at what Joe Biden said when he announced his run for office. He brought up images of Charlottesville, talked about the rhetoric that exists in our country, and I think you'll see Biden really lean in on that. And so I think Biden will not probably respond in kind to a lot of the attacks that the president is making, because it really proves the point that he's trying to make with his campaign. I mean, look, these things are happening in our country today. 10 miles from where I live yesterday, the Ku Klux Klan individuals were standing on the street. Joe Biden is making an important point that this is real and happening in our country, and it's not acceptable. So I think that, you won't see him probably return fire on a lot of these attacks. And as far as the age thing, they're essentially about the same age anyway. Yeah. So I don't really think that makes a big difference.
Can I get all three of you to weigh in on the candidacy that has just been announced today by Joe Walsh, of course, a one-term conservative congressman from Illinois, also a conservative radio show host who's actually been called Trump before Trump. Just very quickly, what do you think of him jumping into the race? Lauren, you first.
I think it's a vanity project at best. This is someone who has called for policing the border with alligators and moats if necessary. He was Trump before Trump.
Right.
There may be an appetite on the right for a primary challenge. It's not Joe Walsh to the candidate.
Danielle?
He is actually no better than Trump. So if his candidacy can pick off some votes here and there, then I'm all for it. But it's not like he's offering anything better. His ideology is the same, and he's just as racist and xenophobic.
All right. Last word to you, Adrienne.
Yeah, I agree with the other panelists. I think it's a vanity project. Donald Trump's approval rating is 85% among Republicans, so it's going to be difficult. But I also predict, Alex, that I'm going to have a lot of Joe Walsh from the Eagles lyrics going through my head over the next few months. So that's my random thought on this.
Well, my song for you then will be "Given Your Backdrop," somewhere out on that horizon. You know the song. That's what I'm going to be singing. All right. Well, very good to see
You're
all
good.
three of you.
You're good.
All right. Thanks, ladies. Good to see you. Joe Walsh, in fact, is going to be Candace Gibson's guest at 3 p.m. here on MSNBC Live. Meantime, it's an NBC poll that just came out this morning. The big takeaway, 70% of Americans say they're angry at the political establishment. We're going to break this down with a member of Congress next.